Mama, do you think he'll like it? Do you think it'll be good enough? Lena Pruitt looked down at her 4-year-old daughter, Rosie, who was standing on her step stool beside the kitchen counter, flour dusted across her cheek like a soft brushstroke, eyes wide and completely serious. Lena smoothed the flour away with her thumb and said quietly, "Baby, anything made with this much love is always good enough." She believed that. She had to believe that, because the cake sitting on the counter had cost her $11.40, which was exactly the amount she'd set aside for Thursday's bus fare. She would figure Thursday out later. Right now, the little boy next door was turning 4 years old, and his father had been so quietly overwhelmed lately that Lena didn't think anyone had remembered. She had noticed, the way neighbors notice things they don't say out loud, the single light on late at night, the same jacket worn through 3 weeks of cold mornings, the little boy, Cody, pressing his face to the hallway window some evenings with that particular look children get when they're waiting for something they can't name. So she had baked a cake. Her neighbor's name was Stellan Voss, 33 years old, single father, quiet in the way that people are quiet when they're holding too many things at once. He had moved into apartment 4B 8 weeks ago with Cody and 4 boxes and a kitchen that he clearly didn't know how to use. Lena had heard the smoke alarm twice in the first week. What the building didn't know, what the hallway and the mailboxes and the thin walls had given no indication of, was who Stellan Voss actually was. He had spent 9 years as a celebrated chef, most recently as the executive culinary director of a restaurant group with locations in Chicago, New York, and San Francisco. He had been on 2 food television programs. His name appeared in the kind of magazine that sat in dentist office waiting rooms. He had walked away from all of it 14 months ago after Cody's mother left, and left completely. No forwarding address, no calls, no arrangement. Stellan had looked at his son and looked at his life and made a choice that the industry called a breakdown and that he quietly called clarity. He took a low-profile consulting contract that let him work remotely and be home by 3. He gave up the restaurants. He moved somewhere smaller. He was still learning who he was outside of the kitchen he'd built his identity around. He had not, in all of this, remembered to plan a birthday cake for his son. Lena knocked on 4B at 6:15 with the cake on a plastic tray, Rosie beside her holding a single birthday balloon she'd found in the bottom of a drawer. The balloon was slightly deflated. Rosie held it like it was precious. Stellan opened the door and looked at them, at the cake with its uneven frosting and careful candles, at the balloon, at Rosie's solemn, proud face, and he didn't speak for a moment. "We didn't want Cody to not have a cake," Lena said simply. "I hope that's okay." Stellan looked at the cake, then at her. Something moved across his face that he didn't try to hide. I actually forgot his birthday cake." He pressed his hand briefly to his forehead. "I had the day marked. I bought him a gift. The cake didn't—" He stopped. "It happens," Lena said softly. "You're doing this alone. It happens."
He stepped back and let them in. Cody and Rosie sat side by side at the small kitchen table, and Lena lit the candles, and they all sang, slightly off-key, completely sincere, and Cody blew them out with his whole face scrunched in concentration. When he opened his eyes, he looked at the cake like it was the most important thing he'd ever seen. That look, Lena tucked it somewhere safe inside herself. After the children were settled with cake and a cartoon, Stellan stood in the kitchen doorway and watched Lena quietly begin to clear the small mess without being asked. He noticed things, the way a chef notices. The careful way she'd leveled the frosting with the back of a spoon, the deliberate placement of the candles, the fact that, despite clearly modest means, the cake was made with real butter and good vanilla. "You bake a lot?" he asked. "When I can afford to," she said honestly. "Rosie and I do it together on weekends sometimes. It's our thing." The crumb structure on that cake is better than some I've seen from trained bakers. Lena looked up, uncertain if he was being kind or truthful. I just follow my grandmother's recipe. What does your grandmother's recipe say about the butter temperature? She blinked. Room temperature. She was very specific about it. Stellan nodded slowly, the way someone nods when a suspicion is confirmed. Your grandmother knew what she was doing. He didn't tell her who he was that night. She found out 3 days later when Rosie, watching a cooking segment on the small living room television, pointed at the screen and said, "Mama, that's Cody's daddy." Lena sat down slowly on the couch. She watched the segment, a rerun from 2 years ago, and saw Stellan Voss in a professional kitchen, composed and precise, explaining the architecture of flavor to a host who kept using the word genius. She sat with that information for a full day before she knew what to do with it. She almost did nothing. Pride has a way of making silence feel safer than honesty. But Rosie needed new shoes. The bus fare she'd skipped had created a small cascade of complications. And there was an opening, Lena had been watching it for weeks, at a small custom cake shop 2 neighborhoods over that was looking for a part-time baker with a reliable hand and a willingness to learn. She had the hand. She didn't have anyone to vouch for her ability. She had a grandmother's recipe and flour on her countertop and 11 years of baking things for people who needed them. She wrote Stellan a note, just a paragraph. She slid it under his door and then stood in her own hallway, feeling like she'd handed someone something breakable. The note said only, "I saw the television segment. I don't want anything because of that, but I've been trying to apply to the Clover Street Bakery, and I don't know how to show someone what I can do without a formal background. If you ever had a moment to taste something I've made and tell me honestly whether it's worth pursuing, I would be grateful. No obligation. Lena." He knocked that evening. He had 2 things in his hands, a piece of paper and a jar of good vanilla extract. "I called Clover Street this afternoon," he said quietly. "I know the owner. Her name is Daphne Pratt. I told her I'd eaten your cake and that she should give you a tasting interview." He paused. "I should have offered sooner. I saw what you did for Cody, and I didn't say enough." Lena looked at the vanilla, then at him. "Stellan, you didn't have to. You spent your bus fare," he said simply. "I know what things cost when you're doing it alone. You spent your Thursday bus fare on my son's birthday cake." His voice was steady but quiet. "Let somebody do something back." She recognized those words, the shape of them, the offering in them. She took the vanilla. The tasting interview was the following Saturday. Lena brought Rosie's grandmother's lemon cake with brown butter frosting. Daphne Pratt tasted it, set down her fork, and said, "When can you start?" Rosie started at the bakery on a Tuesday. Daphne gave her weekend mornings, which became weekday afternoons, which became a small but steady paycheck, and, more than that, a place that felt like hers. And sometimes, when Lena packed 2 small slices of whatever she'd made that week and knocked on 4B, Stellan would open the door, and Cody and Rosie would immediately disappear into the living room, and the 2 of them would stand in the kitchen and talk about flavor, about recipes, about the particular courage it takes to keep showing up for a life that hasn't gotten easier yet. No grand gestures, just 2 tired, good people standing in a kitchen with cake between them. An $11 cake made with bus fare and butter and a grandmother's instructions had started all of it, not because of what it was worth, but because of who it was for, and the love folded into every layer. Kindness baked in quietly without announcement has a way of rising. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, subscribe, and comment. Let's spread more stories of kindness and hope together.